My name is Celeste Morgan, 28 years old. Until that morning, I thought I had managed to carve out a life of balance, quiet enough to be mine, ambitious enough to feel proud of. I worked as a social media marketer at Digital Pulse, a fast-rising agency downtown. It wasn't glamorous like the movies made marketing out to be, but it gave me independence, stability, and a sense that I was building brick by brick towards something better. My desk overlooked the skyline, sunlight streaking across the glass each morning as if rewarding my persistence. 4 years of careful progress had finally landed me in charge of a national fitness chain's rebranding project. My boss, Diane, had already hinted at a promotion if things went well. 15% more income, 15% closer to freedom. And then, in one morning, all of that felt like it began to unravel. I had been saving, every month without fail, 20% of my salary into a home fund. My apartment, which I rented from my parents at a discounted rate, was my sanctuary in the meantime. One bedroom, modest but warm, filled with stories I had stitched together over the years. A sectional sofa I'd bought piece by piece, paying off in 6 monthly installments. A coffee table I'd sanded and stained myself from an estate sale find. Bookshelves that held not just my marketing manuals and psychology paperbacks, but also my vinyl record collection. Tiny fragments of my college days, when I still believed music could save me. My bedroom was sacred, a memory foam mattress worth every penny, high thread count sheets that whispered luxury, and a reading nook by the window where rainy Sundays were spent with coffee and novels. Even my kitchen, cramped as it was, carried joy. The espresso machine I bought for myself as a birthday gift hummed every morning with the sound of self-reliance. Every object had a purpose, a meaning. They were more than items. They were proof of my discipline, of the independence I had forged. But family, in my world, was the one thing discipline never seemed able to control. My parents had always favored my younger sister, Stephanie. She was 3 years younger, softer, spoiled in ways I never was. While I juggled part-time jobs to pay my way through school, she attended an expensive private university, switching majors 3 times, without ever worrying about tuition. When she wanted a car, my parents bought her one. When I needed a car, I signed a loan at the bank, my father even charging me family interest when he reluctantly offered help during a rough patch. These things weren't new. They were the backdrop of my life, like the hum of an air conditioner you've long since stopped noticing. Still, I had made peace with it. My path was self-made, their favoritism a burden I learned to sidestep. And the apartment felt like the one arrangement that finally leaned in my favor. I should have known it wouldn't last. 2 weeks before the collapse, Stephanie texted me out of the blue. "How are you doing, sis?" Unusual. Our conversations usually limited to obligatory holiday chatter. Then my mother called, casually weaving into conversation how Stephanie had broken up with her boyfriend, Mark, and quit her job at the boutique. "She's going through such a difficult time," Mom said, her voice warm with rehearsed sympathy. "Family needs to stick together during hardships." I remember nodding on the phone, distracted, not realizing her words were the prelude to something bigger. The night before it all happened, I had been lying in bed, scrolling Pinterest for backsplash ideas for the kitchen I thought I'd upgrade in summer. I had no idea the space I loved so much would soon feel foreign. The pounding came at exactly 7:00 a.m., a violent, impatient knock that ripped me from sleep half an hour before my alarm. Groggy, hair sticking in wild tufts, I stumbled to the door, expecting perhaps a package delivery. Instead, I swung it open to find Stephanie. Her eyes were puffy, either from crying or lack of sleep. She stood with 2 massive suitcases, a duffel, and a designer purse that looked far too expensive for someone who had just quit her job. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Surprise. I'll be staying with you for a while." For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. "Stephanie, what are you talking about? What are you doing here so early?" She pushed past me as if the doorway were hers to cross. The wheels of her suitcase clacked against my hardwood. "Mark cheated on me. With his coworker, can you believe it? 2 years together. And my boss was being toxic about me needing some time off, so I quit. I can't deal with heartbreak in a hostile workplace." She collapsed dramatically onto my sofa as though it were a stage set for her misery. I stood frozen in the doorway, my stomach twisting. "This is a 1-bedroom, I said slowly. "There's no space. Why didn't you go to Mom and Dad's? She sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were the unreasonable one. Their house is being renovated, the guest room's torn apart, and Dad snores. And Mom's on that kale kick. Ugh, I'd starve there. Your place is perfect. You've always had such great taste, Cel. The childhood nickname stabbed me. Cel. The one they always used when I was the dependable older sister, the one who sacrificed. I had shed that name long ago, but in her mouth, it sounded like a chain tightening. Before I could reply, my phone rang. Mom. A sinking dread clutched at me as I answered. Celeste, your sister is there, right? She began, not waiting for confirmation. Make her feel welcome. She's going through such a difficult time. She needs family now. Mom, I understand, but my apartment's too small. Maybe she could stay with Jessica. They've been friends for years. Jessica isn't family, Mom snapped. Family takes care of each other. Don't be selfish. I retreated into the kitchen, lowering my voice. It's not selfish, it's practical. There's literally no room. She can't stay here. She can sleep on the couch. It's temporary until she's back on her feet, unless you'd rather I get your father involved. The threat hung heavy in the silence. I knew what that meant. His harsher voice, his iron insistence. No protest tolerated. I'd played this game before, and the script never changed. Fine, I whispered, swallowing the knot in my throat. That's my good girl, Mom said warmly, her manipulation cloaked in affection. Love you both. When I returned, Stephanie was already unpacking her toiletries on my coffee table. My table. The one I had refinished with my own hands. She hummed a tune as if redecorating her bedroom, not crashing into mine. The couch pulls out, I muttered. We'll need to fold it back during the day. I work from home 2 days a week. I need space. She barely looked up. Actually, I was thinking I'd take the bedroom. The living room gets too much light in the mornings. You know I'm not a morning person. I stared, heat rising in my chest. This is my apartment. I'm not giving up my room. Stephanie's lips trembled into that expression she had perfected since childhood, the perfect cocktail of hurt and indignation. Wow, Cel. I just lost my boyfriend and my job, and you can't even make a small sacrifice? The living room's bigger anyway. Don't be so uptight. I wanted to scream. Instead, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. Be kind to your sister. Remember all the times she was there for you. I couldn't recall a single one. But I knew this battle wasn't worth fighting. Not today. Fine, I said through clenched teeth. You can use the living room, but we need ground rules. Stephanie's face lit up instantly, relief washing away her crocodile tears. You're the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids sharing a room. But I remembered those nights, her borrowing my clothes without asking, tattling to Mom when I tried to set boundaries, turning even my small victories into complaints. My sanctuary was gone. As she cheerfully unpacked, filling the air with her off-key humming, I texted Laura, my best friend. Stephanie just moved in. No warning, no choice. Send wine and patience. Her reply was immediate. Oh no. Nightmare flashbacks to college roommate days. Coming over tonight with emergency supplies. Hang in there. I stared at my sister, now rearranging my pillows and inserting her framed photos beside mine, as if erasing the borders of who belonged here. My heart sank. This was only the beginning. The first week of living with Stephanie felt like watching an invader plant flags in every corner of my territory. My apartment, once a curated sanctuary, became an occupied zone. My mornings used to begin in silence, coffee steaming in my favorite ceramic mug, laptop humming as I outlined campaigns before the city woke. Now they began with stumbling over her half-zipped duffel bags strewn across the living room, or worse, the thrum of reality television blaring at 2 a.m. because she lost track of time. I adjusted my laptop camera during an important client video call, angling it to hide the chaos behind me. Blankets crumpled on the sofa bed, makeup palettes fanned across the coffee table, bras hanging off the back of dining chairs. My boss, Diane, raised an eyebrow. Redecorating? She asked dryly. Yes, I lied, my cheeks hot. Just trying out new layouts. It wasn't just the mess. Stephanie carried with her a gravitational pull that warped everything around her. She slept until noon most days, blinds drawn tight, while I tiptoed around trying not to disturb her healing process. I'd return from my office days to find my fridge raided, my meal-prepped containers emptied as if they'd evaporated, and my specialty coffee beans, imported, carefully rationed, ground down to nearly nothing. One evening, I opened my hidden stash of dark chocolate, a ritual I saved for stressful nights. The box was empty. Stephanie was sprawled on my sofa, wrapped in my favorite throw blanket, eyes glued to a dating reality show. Crumbs glittered on her shirt like confetti. "Steph," I began carefully, "that chocolate was mine. I've been saving it." She waved her hand lazily without looking away from the screen. "Relax, Cel, it's just chocolate. You're so uptight." Something inside me clenched. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't even a roommate. She was a storm that had claimed squatters' rights. By Wednesday, my patience had worn thin. I sat across from her at the dining table, pulling out a notepad where I had scrawled a list of house rules. The handwriting trembled, though not from fear, more from the fury I was trying to contain. "Stephanie, we need to talk." She muted the TV reluctantly, eyes narrowed. "Is this going to be a lecture?" "No, it's about boundaries." I slid the notepad across. Number 1, quiet hours when I'm working or sleeping. Number 2, we split groceries and utilities. Number 3, respect for personal space and belongings. She stared at the list as though it were a joke. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "You're seriously giving me a roommate contract? I'm your sister, not some rando from Craigslist." "That's exactly why we need clear boundaries," I said, my voice tight but steady. "Because we're sisters, things can get messy if we don't communicate." Stephanie leaned back, smirking. "God, you've always been like this, controlling, uptight. Can't you just relax? This isn't forever." "How long is it then?" I pressed, my nails digging crescents into my palm. "Have you started looking for jobs? Apartments?" She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Can you stop pressuring me? I told you, I'm processing. Besides, Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to." The words struck like ice. My parents had promised her indefinite shelter in my apartment without even asking me. I excused myself, retreating to the small balcony with my phone clutched tight. The city stretched below, glittering with indifferent lights. I dialed my father. "Did you and Mom tell Stephanie she could stay here indefinitely?" I demanded. There was a pause before his measured voice responded. "Celeste, your sister is going through a difficult time. We thought you'd want to help family. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you." "It's not temporary, is it? She has no plans to get a job or her own place. She's not contributing anything." My father's tone hardened. "Your mother and I give you that apartment at a discount. Many people would be grateful. Don't forget that." I swallowed hard. "I am grateful, but Stephanie isn't respecting my space or my things." "You've always been the responsible one," he said, his voice softening into that manipulative register I knew too well. "Stephanie needs stability right now. Be the big sister. She looks up to you." I wanted to scream. "She doesn't look up to me. She walks over me." But I knew it wouldn't matter. The roles in this family had been cast long ago, and I was the dependable understudy to Stephanie's leading star. When I returned inside, Stephanie had turned the volume back up. She glanced at me with that smug certainty that told me she knew exactly how this would play out. The following days blurred into a haze of small humiliations. On Thursday, I discovered my favorite silk blouse crumpled in a heap, wine-stained, after Stephanie had borrowed it for an impromptu night out. When I confronted her, she pouted. "I thought you'd be flattered I wanted to wear it. Don't be dramatic." On Friday, she invited 3 friends over without warning, while I was mid-presentation on Zoom. Laughter and music bled through my headset, my clients' raised eyebrows burning into my memory. "Family visit," I lied quickly, cheeks flaming, before muting myself to shout from the bedroom, "Steph, turn it down." Her muffled response, "It's Friday night, Cel, chill." Even my bathroom wasn't safe. One night, desperate for a moment of solitude, I opened my cabinet and found my expensive serum, a tiny glass bottle I'd saved up for, completely empty. The plastic pump clicked uselessly, the last drop already absorbed into her glowing skin. That was when I broke. I shut the door, slid down against the tiled wall, and cried. The sobs came fast and hot, shaking out of me like years of exhaustion I hadn't admitted to myself. I wasn't crying just for the serum, or the blouse, or the chocolate. I was crying because my home was gone, my sanctuary invaded, and my parents had made it clear my voice mattered least. When I could finally breathe again, I called Laura, my lifeline. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, my throat raw. "I feel like a guest in my own home. My parents won't listen. Stephanie won't change. I'm trapped." Laura's silence on the other end was filled with understanding. Finally, she said, "Cel, have you thought about getting your own place, somewhere new?" I laughed bitterly. "On such short notice, with these prices? My parents are already charging me below market. I can't afford anything decent." Maybe not comparable, she said gently, but something that's yours, where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the discount? Her words lodged in my chest, uncomfortable but true. I had been clinging to the apartment because it was safe, affordable. But what was the price of that affordability? My peace? My autonomy? When I hung up, Stephanie was still laughing at her show in the living room. My sanctuary was gone, but maybe, just maybe, I still had the power to reclaim myself. And yet, before I could act, before I could even fully admit what Laura had planted in my mind, the decision was taken out of my hands. On Sunday evening, my phone lit up with a call from my father. His tone was calm, measured, too deliberate. Celeste, your mother and I want to have a family discussion. Tonight. It's important. Both you and Stephanie need to be present. We'll be at your apartment at 7. The dread that flooded me was cold, unmistakable. What is this about? I asked. We'll discuss everything tonight, he said, and hung up. Stephanie, who had been scrolling her phone, smirked without looking up. Family meeting? Sounds serious. I didn't answer, but deep inside I knew something irreversible was coming. By the second week, my life no longer felt like mine. It was as if my apartment had been annexed into a kingdom where Stephanie ruled and I paid tribute. The bills told the story first. The water bill doubled, courtesy of her 40-minute showers twice a day. The electric bill spiked thanks to her curling irons, blow dryers, and hours of streaming shows. My fridge, once neatly stocked with meal prep containers for the week, became a graveyard of empty plastic. I would open the door to find little more than wilted kale and half a jar of pickles, everything else devoured without a second thought. On Tuesday, I reached for the specialty coffee beans I allowed myself once a month, a quiet indulgence. The bag was nearly empty. Stephanie breezed past me, yawning, a travel mug in hand. By the way, Cel, love that coffee. So smooth. You should get more. It's $25 a bag, I said, my voice tight. She shrugged. Worth it. Don't be stingy. Her entitlement was like a constant buzzing in my ears. Work, which had always been my refuge, started to falter. During one client call, a loud burst of laughter erupted from the living room, Stephanie chatting with a friend on speakerphone. The client, visibly irritated, asked if I could find a quieter place to work. My cheeks burned with shame. That night, I stayed late at the office, pretending I had extra work just to delay going home. When I finally walked through the door, the apartment smelled of takeout Thai food, containers spread across my coffee table. Stephanie's friends were sprawled on my sofa, one of them actually wearing my cardigan. Celeste! Stephanie greeted me as if she were hosting a party in her apartment. We ordered pad thai. Hope you don't mind. I told them you wouldn't. I forced a smile that tasted like ash. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door. But even there, muffled laughter bled through the walls. The breaking point came over something small, almost laughably small, my face serum, a tiny frosted glass bottle I had splurged on after a grueling campaign project. I opened it one night, desperate for a small comfort, and found it empty. The pump clicked uselessly. My reflection in the mirror blurred as tears filled my eyes. I slid down against the cool tile wall, sobs tearing out of me. I wasn't crying over serum. I was crying because I felt erased. Every boundary, every ounce of independence I had carved out for myself had been invaded. With trembling hands, I called Laura. I can't do this anymore, I choked out. I feel like a guest in my own home. My parents don't care. Stephanie doesn't listen. I'm trapped. Her voice was soft, steady. Cel, breathe. You're not trapped. Have you thought about moving? I laughed bitterly through my tears. I can't afford it. Not with what my parents charge me here. If I left, I'd get a shoebox for twice the price. Maybe it wouldn't be comparable, she said. But it would be yours. Somewhere you make the rules. Isn't that worth more than a discount? The words lodged deep inside me, unsettling. My apartment had been my fortress, but now it was a prison dressed in familiar furniture. The next morning, I dragged myself to the office, exhaustion carved into my face. During my one-on-one with Diane, my boss, she closed her laptop and studied me. Celeste, is everything okay? You missed a minor deadline last week. That's not like you. I hesitated, shame prickling at my skin. Family issues, I admitted. My sister is staying with me. It's been an adjustment. Diane's eyes softened. Family can be complicated, but don't let it derail you. The Henderson account is too important. I nodded, promising myself I'd find a way to fix things. but the truth was, I had no idea how. That evening, I tried again with Stephanie. I found her lounging in my blanket, phone in hand. Steph, we need to talk about expenses. Groceries, bills, they've gone way up since you moved in. Can we split costs? She didn't even look up. I'm still healing, Cel. I can't take on that stress right now. You're eating my food, using my things, running up my bills. She cut me off with a sigh. God, you sound like Mom lecturing me. Chill. It's temporary. How temporary? My voice cracked. Do you even have a plan? She finally looked at me, eyes sharp. Why are you so obsessed with control? Mom and Dad said I could stay as long as I need. Why can't you just support me for once? The words hit like a slap. Support her? Hadn't my entire life been one long exercise in supporting her, even when it meant sacrificing myself? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the creak of the sofa as Stephanie shifted, the glow of her phone seeping under my bedroom door. Every sound reminded me I no longer had a home. On Friday, I came back from the office to find my favorite blouse, a pale silk I wore for important meetings, stuffed into the laundry hamper, stained with red wine. You wore this? I asked, holding it up. She shrugged. Yeah, it looked good on me, right? It's ruined. Don't be dramatic. Dry cleaners exist. I bit down so hard on my tongue I tasted blood. By Sunday, I was hollow with exhaustion. I sat at my dining table, staring at the half-finished grocery list I couldn't afford to complete alone anymore. Stephanie patted in, scrolling her phone. Oh, Dad's calling tonight, she said casually. He said it's important, family meeting, here, at 7. My stomach twisted. What meeting? She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Don't know. He just said you and I both need to be there. The dread was instant, heavy. Family meetings were never conversations. They were verdicts. And in this family, verdicts always fell hardest on me. At 7 o'clock sharp, there would be a knock on my door, and I knew somehow that whatever was coming would change everything. Sunday evening, 7 o'clock sharp. The knock on my door was not tentative. It was deliberate. 3 heavy raps that reverberated through the apartment like a gavel striking wood. Stephanie, who had been lounging with her phone in hand, straightened immediately, almost nervously, though she tried to disguise it with a casual shrug. I opened the door to find my parents standing there, framed by the dim hallway light. My mother carried a casserole dish, the aroma of baked pasta wafting out as if this were some kind of family dinner. My father carried a leather folder tucked under his arm, his lips pressed into a line that suggested business rather than comfort. Celeste, he greeted, his tone clipped. May we come in? I stepped aside, my chest tight. My mother swept past me, already chattering about how she'd thought ahead, so we wouldn't have to worry about dinner. My father followed, his polished shoes clicking against my hardwood floors, each step echoing like a verdict. We gathered at my small dining table, the one I had restored from a flea market find. Stephanie sat next to my mother, shoulders tucked in, her eyes darting between us. My father remained standing a moment longer, clearing his throat before sliding the folder onto the table. Celeste, he began, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that this arrangement seems to be working, we've decided it's time to make some adjustments. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Adjustments. The word clanged like metal. What kind of adjustments? I asked, my voice deliberately even. My father opened the folder with slow precision. Inside was a typed document, neat lines of legal jargon staring back at me. He slid it across the table, as though presenting evidence. Effective next month, he said, your rent will be increased. Doubled, to be exact. The air in my lungs fled. Double, I repeated, staring at the paper. 2 people living in the unit means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear, my mother chimed in, spooning casserole onto Stephanie's plate as though this were a casual explanation. It's only fair. Fair? The word cracked in my throat. Stephanie isn't paying anything. She doesn't even have a job. Which is precisely why we need to adjust your rent, my father said, his tone patient, almost patronizing. Your sister is rebuilding her life. In the meantime, we need to cover the additional expenses. I turned to Stephanie. She was studying her plate, lips pressed together, but I saw it, the tiny curve of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She had known. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, my voice trembling not from uncertainty, but from fury. You want me to pay double rent to cover Stephanie living here, even though I didn't invite her, even though I don't have space for her, even though she has turned my life upside down. Celeste, my mother said sharply, her voice edged with warning, She's family. Families support each other in hard times. I snapped before I could stop myself. Why is the support always one-directional? Why am I always the one giving while Stephanie only takes? The table went still. My father's brow furrowed. My mother's lips thinned. And Stephanie, her eyes filled with glistening tears on cue, her voice trembling. "I can't believe you'd say something so cruel," she whispered. "Bad luck or bad choices?" The words slipped out before I could rein them back. "Which one is it this time, Steph?" My mother's gasp was sharp, scandalized. "Celeste Morgan, how dare you? After everything we've done for you, offering you this apartment at below market rent, giving you a safe home, you repay us with ingratitude." Ingratitude? I leaned forward, heat flooding my face. "I've paid rent faithfully every single month. I've maintained this place, improved it. That was a business arrangement, not a charity." "And now the arrangement is changing," my father said firmly, sliding the pen across the table toward me. "The new rate will take effect at the start of next month. You have 2 weeks to adjust your budget." I stared at the numbers on the page. Nearly 70% of my income after taxes. My savings plan obliterated. My independence shackled. "I can't afford this," I said simply. "Then perhaps you should consider a better paying job," my father replied with clinical detachment. "Or take on freelance work. People your age manage side hustles all the time." The casual dismissal of my reality snapped something inside me. Years of biting my tongue, years of swallowing the unfairness, years of watching Stephanie stumble while I carried the weight, it all ignited. "Or," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest, "I could just move out." Silence, then laughter. My mother chuckled, shaking her head as if I'd made a silly joke. My father's mouth curved into a knowing smirk. Stephanie giggled softly, covering it with her hand. "Move out to where?" my mother asked between her laughter. "Do you have any idea what rent is like right now?" "You wouldn't find anything even close to this," my father added confidently. "Even at the new rate, you're getting a bargain." Stephanie leaned forward, her voice syrupy. "Besides, your whole life is here, Cel. Your stuff, your routine. You wouldn't really leave." Their dismissive laughter felt like knives. They truly believed I was trapped. They believed I lacked the courage to choose myself over them. I picked up the pen, turning it between my fingers. For a moment, I imagined signing, surrendering, continuing this charade until I lost myself completely. But something in me refused. I set the pen down. "I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week." The casserole cooled on our plates as the rest of dinner passed in forced chatter. Stephanie babbling about finding herself, my parents nodding indulgently. I barely heard them. My mind was a storm of possibilities. When they finally left, Stephanie flopped onto the sofa, flicking on the television as if nothing had happened. "They're right, you know," she said casually, reaching for the remote. "You wouldn't really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change." Her certainty burned hotter than any insult. She believed I was powerless. But as I stood there, watching her sink deeper into the cushions I had paid for, using the remote I had bought, in the apartment I had made a home, I felt something harden inside me. This wasn't just about rent. This was about respect, boundaries, self-worth. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was done playing the role they had written for me. The night after the ambush, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the echoes of their laughter gnawing at me. They were so certain I wouldn't leave, so certain I was trapped. My body was still, but my mind was a riot of questions. Could I really do it? Could I walk away from everything I'd built here, from the only arrangement that had ever felt like a win? By dawn, exhaustion had finally settled into clarity. Maybe the only way to win was to stop playing by their rules. I called in sick to work, my first sick day in over a year. My voice sounded foreign as I told Diane I had a fever. In truth, I felt more alert than ever, adrenaline sharpening me into focus. Once Stephanie left for her networking session at the coffee shop, a thin disguise for endless hours scrolling on her phone, I spread my laptop, receipts, and notebooks across the dining table. My table. The battlefield where last night's ultimatum had been delivered. Today, it would be the war room for my counterattack. First, the finances. I opened my savings account. 3 years of discipline stared back at me. Not enough for a down payment yet, but enough for an escape. A cushion that could cover first and last month's rent, a security deposit, moving costs. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it was possible. I pulled up a budget calculator. Rent should be no more than 30% of take-home pay. At market rates, that number was bleak, Smaller space, longer commute, fewer luxuries. But then Laura's voice echoed in my head. Isn't your sanity worth more than a discount? I scribbled figures, cut corners, adjusted expectations. It was tight, but doable. Next, I dug through my filing cabinet until I found my lease agreement. My hands trembled as I scanned the text. After the first year, it had converted to a month-to-month. 30 days notice required. That was it. No mention of minimum stay. No clause about furniture. Furniture. My eyes moved to the sectional sofa, the refinished coffee table, the espresso machine gleaming under the kitchen light. Every item had been mine, purchased with my money, my sweat. My parents had only provided the shell of the apartment, stove, dishwasher, blinds. Everything else bore my fingerprints. Still, I wanted confirmation. I texted Laura, "Can you ask your brother Kyle about tenant rights and furniture ownership?" Hypothetically. 20 minutes later, she called. "Kyle says as long as it's not listed in the lease as landlord provided, it's yours. Even the light fixtures if you bought them. They can't touch it." I closed my eyes, relief flooding me. The furniture, the appliances, the little luxuries, they weren't just possessions. They were leverage. Proof I hadn't been living in their charity, but in my own creation. That night, while Stephanie snored on the sofa, I searched rental listings. My heart sank at the first 3. Dark, cramped units with mold in the corners and cockroaches skittering across the reviews. But then I found a lead, a newly renovated studio, smaller than my current place, but clean, bright, with a secure building. 15 minutes further from the office, but on a direct bus line. I sent an inquiry. The next day, I met Vanessa, a real estate agent with sharp eyes and a firmer handshake. "The market's tight," she warned, flipping through her clipboard. "But not impossible. You'll need to move fast." "I can move in 10 days, I said, surprising even myself. Her eyebrows rose. "Good, then we'll make it happen." Walking through the studio, I felt a strange mixture of grief and exhilaration. The space was smaller, yes. No reading nook, no separate bedroom. But it was mine. No one could invade it without permission. I signed the lease on the spot, my hand steady. Back at the apartment, Stephanie was FaceTiming a friend, sprawled across the sofa that would soon be gone. She didn't notice me, quietly measuring the bookshelves, noting dimensions, or sorting items into categories. Must take, sell, donate. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. The final piece of my plan came through social media. My mother had been posting about the upcoming family reunion at my aunt's house 3 hours away. A whole weekend of relatives, games, and nostalgia I'd already declined. Stephanie had gushed about how excited she was to go. They'd all be gone, every last one of them. It was perfect. I gathered my friends, whispering the plan into motion like a covert operation. Laura dubbed it Operation Independence Day. Her boyfriend, Marcus, offered his toolkit. 2 other friends volunteered their trucks. "Saturday," I told them, my voice firm. "We clear everything. Furniture, clothes, everything that's mine. When they come back Sunday, they'll find the apartment exactly as it was when I first moved in. Empty." Laura grinned, though her eyes softened. "Cess, are you ready for what comes after?" I swallowed hard. Fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve. My parents' fury, Stephanie's tears, the inevitable accusations of betrayal. But underneath, stronger than fear, was something else, the steel of a boundary long overdue. "I'm ready," I whispered. The days crawled toward Saturday. I packed discreetly, hiding boxes in the back of my closet. I withdrew cash for last-minute expenses. I checked and rechecked my lease notice, drafting a letter that was factual, devoid of emotion. I am exercising my right to vacate with 30 days' notice. All furnishings removed are my personal property. On Friday evening, I watched Stephanie pack her overnight bag, chattering about how Aunt Jean's reunion was going to be so epic. "You sure you don't want to come?" she asked, smirking. "Mom says everyone will miss you." "I've got work to catch up on," I said truthfully, though not for the reasons she assumed. She waved as the rideshare pulled away. When the taillights disappeared down the street, I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the silence fill the room. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was mine again. Tomorrow it wouldn't be just mine, it would be my past. Saturday dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of morning that felt too pure for the weight of what I was about to do. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning in the hollow quiet, left by Stephanie's absence. My body buzzed with adrenaline, nerves, and something else I hadn't felt in weeks: resolve. By 6 a.m., I was already dismantling my bed frame, the wrench cold and clumsy in my hands. The rhythm of metal loosening against wood was steadying, almost like a battle drum. This wasn't just moving, it was liberation, executed piece by piece. At 7:30, Laura arrived with coffee and bagels, her energy the perfect mix of practical and protective. "Operation Independence Day is a go," she whispered dramatically, handing me a paper cup. Soon after came Marcus, her boyfriend, toolbox slung over his shoulder, his expression serious. "Let's get this done," he said, surveying the apartment like a general assessing a battlefield. By 8 o'clock, the rest of the crew arrived. 2 pickup trucks, an SUV, 6 friends who didn't flinch at the thought of heavy lifting on a hot Saturday. For the first time in weeks, I felt supported. I gathered everyone in the living room, now littered with boxes stacked like fortifications. "Thank you all," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "The plan is simple. Big furniture first, then boxes, then loose items. We'll aim to clear everything by 4. I want this place to look exactly like it did before I moved in. Empty." They nodded, no questions asked. The work began with a kind of fierce choreography. Marcus and another friend tackled the sectional sofa, disassembling it into manageable pieces. Laura and 2 others formed a line, carrying boxes down the stairs and loading them into the truck beds. I floated between groups, directing traffic, labeling boxes, making snap decisions about what went to the new apartment versus what went into Laura's garage for storage. By noon, my bedroom was completely empty. The mattress leaned against the wall, the dresser drawers taped shut and stacked neatly. My closet, once full of neatly pressed work clothes and carefully hidden boxes, stood bare, its emptiness echoing. We broke briefly for sandwiches, sitting cross-legged on the bare floor of the living room. Sweat slicked our faces, but there was laughter too, the kind that reminded me I wasn't alone, no matter how abandoned my family made me feel. "How are you holding up?" Laura asked softly, squeezing my hand. I glanced around at the stripped walls, the gaps where my shelves had been, the absence of the espresso machine on the counter. A lump formed in my throat. "Sad," I admitted, but proud and scared all at once. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly. "This is long overdue." By early afternoon, we had made 3 trips to the new studio. My new landlord, a kindly older man, even held the door open as we shuffled in with furniture. "Most move-ins are chaos," he remarked, amused. "You people have a system." I smiled faintly, though inside I was trembling. Every item placed in the new apartment felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. My bed against the wall, my sofa broken into smaller sections but still mine, my books lined up on the single shelf that fit. Smaller, yes, but lighter too, in a way I hadn't expected. By 3:30, we were down to the final sweep. The shower curtain, the lamps, the kitchen utensils, all boxed. The espresso machine, wrapped carefully in towels, rode in my passenger seat like a crown jewel. When we finished, the apartment stood eerily hollow. Only the built-in appliances remained, cold and impersonal. The echoes of our footsteps bounced against the bare walls. For 5 years, this place had been filled with the story of my independence. Now, it was stripped back to the silence my parents had once offered me. I walked slowly from room to room, checking cabinets and drawers one last time. My hand brushed against the door frame of the bedroom, the corner of the window ledge where I'd once sat reading in the rain. Each touch felt like a goodbye. On the kitchen counter, I placed an envelope containing my keys, the final month's rent check, and the letter I had drafted. The words were simple, factual. "I am terminating my rental agreement with 30 days' notice. All furnishings removed are my personal property. Thank you. No explanations, no apologies." Laura slipped her arm around my shoulders as we stood in the living room together. "Ready?" she asked. I swallowed, my eyes burning. "Yeah." I closed the door gently, locking it for the last time. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was sharp, final, like the closing of a chapter. Outside, my friends clapped, cheering softly. Relief surged through me, though it was laced with the ache of finality. We drove to the new apartment for the last unload. By evening, my things were inside, though nothing was in order. Boxes lined the walls, the sofa pieces stacked like puzzle parts. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. We celebrated with pizza and cheap beer, sitting on the floor among towers of boxes. Laughter filled the space, my friends teasing each other about sore backs and who carried the heaviest loads. But as the night wore on and they trickled out one by one, the quiet returned. I stood in the middle of my new studio, surrounded by familiar things in an unfamiliar space. My phone buzzed. Notifications piled in. Texts, missed calls. Stephanie, what the hell, Celeste? Where is all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? Mom, we came back and the apartment is empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately. Dad, this is unacceptable. That furniture belongs in the unit. You have violated your lease. Call me back before I have to take legal action. Their fury, their disbelief, their panic, it filled the screen like a tidal wave. I stared at it, my hands trembling. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt free. I knew the messages would come, but I hadn't expected the sheer onslaught. My phone buzzed non-stop as if it were possessed. Stephanie, my mother, my father, one after the other. Missed calls stacked on top of unread texts until the screen blurred together. Stephanie's were the loudest in tone, even through the text bubbles. DUTF, Celeste? Where's all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? You're insane. Who does this to their own sister? Mom and Dad are furious. Fix this now. My mother's came next, frantic and guilt-soaked. Celeste Elizabeth Morgan, what have you done? We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some cruel joke? Call me immediately. Then my father's, colder, sharper, like the blade of a knife. This is completely unacceptable. That furniture belongs in the unit. You violated your lease agreement. Call me back before I take legal action. I let the phone buzz itself quiet. Only when the notifications slowed did I finally dial my father. He answered on the first ring, his voice already raised. Explain yourself. I steadied my breath. I told you I was considering moving out. I gave 30 days notice. I paid the last month's rent. I took my belongings. All of them are mine. Your belongings? His voice was incredulous. That furniture belongs to the apartment. You can't just strip it bare. Actually, I can, I said calmly, surprising even myself. I bought every single piece with my own money. I have receipts for all of it. The lease never listed furnishings because you didn't provide any. The apartment was empty when I moved in, and now it's empty again. There was silence on the other end. For the first time, I heard uncertainty in his breathing. This isn't about legalities, he snapped finally. This is about your family, about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. Do you realize what you've done to her? I realize she has parents who could host her, I replied, or she could buy an air mattress. They sell them at Target for under $50. Another pause, longer this time, then his voice lower. The guest room renovations aren't finished. Something in me shifted. Aren't finished? Or never existed? The silence told me everything. I almost laughed, the sound bitter. So you lied. You lied to force her into my apartment. That's not the point. No, Dad, that's exactly the point. You manipulated me into housing her, then tried to make me pay double for it. In the background, I heard my mother's voice shrill with emotion. Give me the phone. A rustle, then her voice flooded the line. How could you do this to us? To your sister? After everything we've given you, this is how you repay us? With betrayal? I closed my eyes, swallowing the old familiar guilt that rose instinctively. But this time, I didn't let it choke me. What I did, I said evenly, was move out of an apartment that no longer worked for me. I took my belongings, nothing more. If Stephanie needs somewhere to stay, she has you. That was always her safety net, not me. There was a pause, her breathing sharp. I never thought you'd actually leave, she whispered. For a moment, I almost heard something new in her tone, not just anger, but shock, a crack in her certainty. I didn't respond. I couldn't. We ended the call with her threats still ringing in my ears, promising discussions to come. But for the first time in years, I hung up without trembling. The next few days were a whirlwind of fallout. Stephanie flooded my phone with a mix of rage and pity. You abandoned me. You're heartless. You'll regret this when I'm gone from your life for good. Then, hours later, I'm scared, Cel. I don't know how to do this alone. Please, just bring back the furniture. I didn't reply. At work, I buried myself in campaigns, each completed task a reminder that outside the chaos of family, I was competent, in control. My new apartment was cramped, yes, but when I came home at night, the silence was mine. My bed, though shoved awkwardly against the wall, felt like a throne compared to the sofa I had once been exiled from. 3 nights after the move, another message arrived, this time from my father. The apartment looks different. Empty. I'd forgotten what it looked like before you moved in. We'll talk more tomorrow. Not an apology, not even close. But it wasn't fury either. It was acknowledgement. A week later, I ran into the fallout directly. I stopped by a grocery store near my old neighborhood, and there she was, Stephanie, at the checkout line, clutching an armful of frozen dinners. Her hair was less styled, her makeup lighter. She looked smaller somehow. She spotted me and froze, her lips parting. For a moment, I thought she'd unleash another tirade. Instead, she looked down, fumbling with her debit card. "You really did it," she muttered when I stepped behind her in line. "Yes," I said softly. Her laugh was bitter, but her eyes were glassy. The look on Dad's face when he walked into that empty place. I wish I'd taken a picture. I blinked, startled. "You thought it was funny?" "I thought it was badass," she admitted, voice low. "None of us thought you'd actually go through with it." There was no time to respond. The cashier bagged her items, and she hurried out. But something in her tone lingered, a reluctant respect, a shift I hadn't thought possible. The guilt trips continued from my mother, of course. Daily calls about family loyalty, about how I had humiliated them in front of relatives. But each time, I let the phone go to voicemail. Each time, the weight of her words pressed a little less. Because beneath all the noise, one truth was clear. For the first time, I had chosen myself. And that choice, I realized, was irreversible. The first week in my new apartment felt like waking up in a stranger's house. The space was smaller, barely 500 square feet, and the boxes towered around me like watchmen. My king-size bed ate nearly half the bedroom, leaving me to shuffle sideways to reach the closet. My sectional sofa had been broken into smaller pieces to fit the narrow living area, awkward angles betraying the comfort it once offered. Yet when I closed the door each night, silence wrapped around me like a warm blanket. The peace was so profound it felt luxurious. No TV blaring at 2 a.m., no strangers laughing in my living room, no evidence of someone else's needs eclipsing mine. Just me. I began to notice small joys. I could leave a chocolate bar in the cabinet and return to it days later, untouched. My coffee beans remained full, waiting for me like old friends. My shampoo bottle emptied only when I used it. These weren't luxuries. They were reminders that my space, however cramped, belonged entirely to me. I introduced myself to my neighbors, something I had never bothered to do in my old building. Across the hall lived a graphic designer named Amelia, who also worked from home. She invited me for coffee in the rooftop garden one morning, the air fresh with the scent of basil and mint from potted plants. Beside her lived Mr. Lawson, a widowed retiree who offered to water my plants when I traveled. Slowly, a small community formed around me, organic, unforced, nothing like the transactional obligations of my family. Work, too, began to recover. With no background noise, no interruptions, I poured myself into the Henderson campaign. Deadlines were met. Clients were impressed. Diane, my boss, smiled during a meeting and said, "This is the Celeste I remember. Keep this up and that promotion is still yours." I walked home that evening, lighter than I'd felt in months. Independence wasn't just about rent or furniture. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I'd allowed to be eroded. Meanwhile, the reports trickled in from my mother, uninvited updates delivered under the guise of small talk. "Your sister finally got a part-time job," she mentioned one afternoon, her tone reluctant, "at a boutique downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's something." Something. For Stephanie, that was monumental. Forced to fend for herself in the stripped apartment, she had apparently borrowed an air mattress from a friend. The lack of comfort had driven her to tears the first night, my mother said, but eventually she grew tired of crying and walked into a store asking for applications. It wasn't a full transformation, but it was a start. And part of me, the part that still remembered late-night giggles when we were children, before favoritism had carved its chasm, felt almost relieved. My father's updates were different, shorter, more clipped, but tinged with something I hadn't heard before, reflection. "We may have encouraged certain patterns," he admitted one evening when I answered his call. His voice was awkward, as though the words were stones he wasn't used to carrying. Stephanie always knew we'd catch her if she fell. Perhaps that wasn't wise. It wasn't an apology, but it was closer to accountability than I had ever heard from him. "Are you managing?" he asked after a pause. "With the budget, I mean." Yes, I said honestly. It's tighter, but I'm making it work. The commute is actually better now. That's good, he murmured. And then quieter still. Your mother doesn't understand. But I do, at least a little. You needed your own life. His words lingered long after the call ended. For once, I hadn't been cast solely as the ungrateful child. My mother, however, refused to soften. She continued her campaign of guilt, her words sharpened to pierce. You've humiliated us, she said during one heated call. Do you know what your cousins said at the reunion when they heard what you did? That you abandoned your family, that you chose furniture over your sister. It was never about furniture, I replied quietly. It was about boundaries. She scoffed, unwilling to hear it. Boundaries are for strangers, not for blood. One day you'll understand the pain you've caused. I hung up before the guilt could settle, pressing my forehead against the cool window of my apartment. Her words still had the power to sting, but they no longer dictated my choices. Stephanie, surprisingly, was the first to reach across the divide. It happened a month later. I was sipping tea in a cafe near the office when my phone buzzed with her name. Expecting another rant, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hi, her voice came, softer than I remembered. Can we meet? Just for coffee, neutral ground. I agreed, wary but willing. We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. Stephanie looked different, less makeup, simpler clothes, hair tied back in a plain ponytail. The sparkle of indulgence had dimmed, replaced with something rawer. Your new place is good? She asked after we ordered. It is, I replied. Small, but mine. She nodded, fiddling with her napkin. I didn't think you'd really leave. None of us did. Honestly, it was badass. The look on Dad's face when he saw that empty apartment, priceless. I blinked at her, surprised. I wasn't trying to be badass. I was trying to survive. I know. She sipped her coffee, eyes down. I've been thinking a lot about how I've lived my whole life expecting people to take care of me. Mom and Dad always caught me, so I never had to face consequences. But when you left, she trailed off, her eyes glassy. It was like the floor disappeared. I hated it, but it made me get a job. And honestly, I like earning my own money. I didn't think I would, but I do. Something in me softened. This wasn't manipulation. It was honesty. Messy, imperfect, but real. That's good, Steph, I said quietly. I'm glad. She looked up then, her expression unguarded. I'm sorry for being a terrible sister, for everything. You weren't terrible, I corrected gently. We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us. Her smile was shaky. Maybe we can build something different, slowly. We sat there for 2 hours, talking more openly than we had in years. When we parted, she hugged me, awkward, but genuine. The healing was uneven. My mother's resentment remained, her calls stiff with disapproval. My father vacillated between reflection and old habits of control. Stephanie stumbled but kept trying, her part-time job steady, her search for a roommate apartment earnest. But I no longer measured my worth by their reactions. Each day in my new apartment, each choice that belonged solely to me, strengthened my spine. For the first time in years, I felt not just independent, but free. And I began to wonder, maybe the greatest consequence of leaving wasn't what it did to them. Maybe it was what it gave to me. 6 months after my dramatic departure, the air shifted again. November arrived, carrying with it the unspoken weight of family gatherings. My mother called, her tone clipped but controlled, to invite me to Thanksgiving dinner. You don't have to come, she added, as if daring me to decline. But it would be nice to have everyone together. For a moment, I considered saying no. The thought of walking back into their house, of breathing in the same air as the old dynamics, filled me with dread. But then I thought of Stephanie, of the coffee shop conversation where she'd admitted she was trying, of the hesitant hug we'd shared. Okay, I said simply. The day of, I drove to my parents' house with a bottle of wine tucked under my arm, the first I had ever bought without calculating whether it fit my budget. My stomach knotted as I pulled into the familiar driveway, memories crashing down, childhood tantrums, teenage fights, adulthood disappointments. The door opened before I could knock. Stephanie stood there, apron dusted with flour, her hair loose around her shoulders. You came, she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. I came, I echoed. She stepped aside and I walked in. The house smelled of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. The dining room table gleamed under the soft light, set with my mother's best china. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt altered. My father carved the turkey with less ceremony than usual. My mother, while stiff, asked about my job, about my new neighbors, even about the rooftop garden I'd mentioned in passing. She avoided the subject of the apartment entirely, but for once, I didn't feel the sharp edge of accusation in her voice. Stephanie set down a pie she had baked herself, burnt at the edges, but offered proudly. "It's not perfect," she admitted, "but it's mine." The words hit me like a mirror. We ate. Conversation was tentative, careful, like stepping across thin ice. But no explosions came. My father even raised his glass halfway through, his voice low. "To family," he said simply. It wasn't grand. It wasn't forced. For once it felt genuine. Later, as the night wound down, Stephanie and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. "Do you remember last Thanksgiving?" she asked, her voice quiet over the clink of plates. "Yes," I said. "You complained that I hadn't made dessert, and Mom scolded me for not being helpful." She winced. "I'm sorry, I was awful." I shrugged. We both played roles we didn't know how to escape. She glanced at me, her eyes searching. "Do you think we can change that?" I dried a plate slowly, considering. "I think we already are." A tentative smile passed between us, fragile but real. Driving home that night, the bottle of wine gone, my stomach heavy with turkey and pie, I reflected on how much had shifted. The fractures in my family were still there. My mother's disapproval, my father's tendency to control, Stephanie's instinct to lean too heavily. But the cracks no longer terrified me. They simply were, and I no longer felt responsible for sealing them with pieces of myself. My apartment greeted me in silence when I unlocked the door. My sofa, though shoved awkwardly into a corner, welcomed me with familiar cushions. My bed, dominating the tiny bedroom, promised rest. The espresso machine gleamed under the soft kitchen light. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't large, but it was mine. Over the following weeks, I began to articulate what had shifted inside me. It wasn't just that I had left an apartment, or taken furniture, or paid a different rent. It was that I had redefined what family meant. Family wasn't blind loyalty. It wasn't endless sacrifice at the cost of your own peace. Family was love paired with respect. And respect, I realized, had to start with myself. I thought of all the times I had confused enabling with love, compliance with kindness. All the times I had believed that to be a good daughter, a good sister, I had to shrink. The truth was harder, lonelier, but freeing. Sometimes the most loving act is to set boundaries so firm they can't be ignored. Stephanie was learning it too. Each text she sent about her job, each small story she shared about paying her own bills, was proof she was no longer being rescued, but building her own ground. Our relationship was changing. Not overnight, not perfectly, but steadily. My father was learning as well. One evening, he called to ask about my promotion prospects. His voice held no judgment, only curiosity. For the first time, it felt like a conversation between two adults, not a superior and a subordinate. My mother, well, she remained unchanged. She still sighed pointedly during calls, still reminded me of how much she had done for me. But I no longer twisted myself into knots trying to appease her. I let the words wash over me, refusing to drown. 1 year after I'd emptied the apartment, I sat in my studio surrounded by furniture that had traveled with me, yet now felt truly at home. I'd added a few new pieces chosen deliberately for this space, while letting go of others that no longer fit. The process mirrored what had happened in my life. We keep what nurtures us, we release what restricts us. Looking back, the lesson was clear. Kindness without boundaries becomes weakness. Love without respect becomes control. And independence, true independence, isn't just about paying your own bills. It's about refusing to be trapped in patterns that consume you. If anyone watching this has ever felt erased in their own home, ever felt their generosity mistaken for obligation, know this: you can choose differently. It won't be easy. It won't happen overnight. But the first step toward reclaiming your life is always the same: deciding that you're worth it. I was, and I am.